The banquet hall glittered, with crystal chandeliers and the murmur of expensive conversation, but Maya Chen couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. She watched as clusters of designer-clad guests orbited around. Richard Thornwood Jr., the tech billionaire whose foundation was hosting this charity gala, their laughter sharp and practiced. But in the corner, slumped in a wheelchair that seemed too large for his frail frame, sat an elderly man whose eyes held a universe of forgotten stories. Maya had learned long ago that you could tell everything about a person by who they chose to see. And tonight, in a room packed with 400 people, absolutely no one was seeing this old man. She'd come to this event by accident, really. Her boss at the catering company had called in sick, and Maya had volunteered to supervise the serving staff, desperate for the overtime pay that would help cover her mother's medical bills. She wasn't supposed to be mingling with guests, wasn't supposed to notice the human dramas playing out between courses of seared salmon and chocolat soufflé. But Maya had never been good at staying invisible. The elderly man shifted in his wheelchair, and she saw him wince. His water glass sat just beyond his trembling reach on a nearby table. Maya glanced around. Surely someone would help him. A family member, a friend, anyone. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The man's lips were dry, cracking at the corners. His hand stretched toward the glass again, fingers grasping at empty air. Maya made her decision. She crossed the marble floor, her sensible flats silent against the stone, and picked up the water glass. "Would you like some water, sir?" she asked softly, crouching down to meet his eyes. The man looked at her with such surprise that it broke her heart, as if kindness was a foreign language he'd almost forgotten. "That would be, thank you," he whispered, his voice rough with disuse. She held the glass steady as he drank, noticing how his hands shook, how carefully he swallowed. Up close, she could see the quality of his suit. Perfectly tailored, but hanging loose on a frame that had once been larger. His cufflinks were simple gold, worn smooth with decades of use. "I'm Richard," he said when he'd finished. "Richard Thornwood." Maya's breath caught. Thornwood. Like the billionaire holding court across the room. "Are you related to—" "My son," Richard said, and something flickered across his face. Pride, maybe, or pain, probably both. This is his event, his foundation. He's doing remarkable things. But the way he said it suggested he was trying to convince himself as much as her. "I'm Maya," she offered, settling into a chair beside him. She knew she should get back to work, but something kept her rooted there. "You have kind eyes, Maya," Richard said. "My late wife Eleanor, she had eyes like that. She always said you could change someone's entire day with just a moment of genuine attention." Over the next 20 minutes, Richard told her about Eleanor, about the small hardware store they'd built together from nothing, working 16-hour days, living in the apartment above the shop, about teaching their son, Richard Jr., the value of honest work, of treating every customer with respect, whether they were buying a single nail or $1,000 worth of supplies. "We sold the store eventually," Richard said, his gaze distant. Junior had these big ideas, these dreams of technology and innovation. "We invested everything in his first startup. I was so proud when it took off." He paused, his throat working. But somewhere along the way he got so busy building his empire that he forgot the small things, the human things. Maya glanced across the room. Richard Jr. was laughing with a senator, one hand gesturing grandly, his smile bright and hollow as a showroom. "I'm sure he cares about you," she said. But the words felt flimsy even as she spoke them. "Oh, he cares," Richard said quietly. "He pays for the best care, the best doctors. He just doesn't—" His voice cracked. "He doesn't have time anymore. Not for an old man who tells the same stories and moves too slowly for this fast world he's built." A microphone squealed across the room. Richard Jr. was taking the stage, his voice booming through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight. Your generosity will change lives, will give hope to those who need it most." Maya saw Richard's face transform as he listened to his son speak about compassion, about seeing the humanity in every person, about reaching down to lift others up. The irony was so thick she could taste it. Then Richard Jr. said something that made the old man stiffen. "My father taught me everything I know about business. He showed me that success means having the courage to think bigger, to move faster, to never let sentiment slow you down. That's not what I taught him, Richard whispered, his voice breaking. That's not what I taught him at all. Maya's heart clenched. She looked at this elderly man, forgotten in his corner, while his son received applause, for words about kindness he didn't truly understand, and she made a choice that would probably cost her job. Mr. Thornwood, she said firmly, you should be up there. You should tell them what you really taught him. Richard looked at her with watery eyes. Oh, Maya, I'm just an old man. Nobody wants to hear. I want to hear, Maya said. And I think everyone else needs to hear it too. She stood and positioned herself behind his wheelchair. Richard gripped the armrests, his whole body trembling. I don't know if I can stand, he admitted. The stroke last year? I haven't stood in front of people since. Then we'll do it together, Maya said simply. She wheeled him toward the stage. People turned to stare. A security guard stepped forward. But something in Maya's expression made him pause. Richard Jr. stopped mid-sentence, his face going pale as he saw his father approaching. Dad? He said into the microphone, the word echoing through the sudden silence. Maya wheeled Richard to the stage stairs. Can you make it? She whispered. Richard looked up at those stairs, only 5 steps. But they might as well have been Everest. Then he looked at his son's face, saw the mask crack, saw something real and frightened beneath it. Yes, he said. Yes, I can. Maya locked the wheelchair and offered her arm. Richard gripped it like a lifeline. Together they climbed. 1 step, 2. The room held its breath. 3, 4. Richard's legs shook violently, but Maya held him steady, her own legs bracing against his weight. 5. They stood at the top together, and the room erupted in applause, not the polite charity gala applause from before, but something genuine, something moved. Richard Jr. stared at his father, the microphone hanging loose in his hand. Up close, Maya could see tears streaming down the billionaire's face. Son, Richard said, his voice soft but amplified by the microphone his son quickly held toward him. I did teach you about business, but that's not what I'm most proud of. He swayed slightly, and both Maya and Richard Jr. reached out to steady him. I'm proud because I taught you that every person matters. The man who buys 1 nail matters just as much as the man who buys 1,000. And somewhere you forgot that. You forgot that I'm still here, that I still have stories, that I still matter. The room was silent enough to hear tears falling. I've watched you build something incredible, Richard continued, his voice growing stronger. But buildings are empty without people inside them. Success is empty when you're standing in it alone. Your mother and I, we were never rich, but we were never alone. We saw each other. Every single day, we saw each other. Richard Jr.'s carefully constructed facade shattered completely. He dropped to his knees in front of his father, this titan of industry becoming just a son again. Dad, I'm so sorry. I got so caught up in proving myself, in building something you'd be proud of that I forgot. God, I forgot to just be with you. I'm already proud, Richard whispered, touching his son's face. I've always been proud. I just wanted you to sit with me sometimes, to listen to my old stories, to see me. Maya felt tears streaming down her own face. Around the room, 400 people who'd come to write checks for charity were witnessing something money couldn't buy, a moment of pure, honest human connection. Later, after Richard and his son had talked for hours, after promises were made and broken, relationships began mending, Richard Jr. found Maya. I don't even know your name, he said. The woman who changed everything. Maya Chen, she said quietly. I was just doing what anyone should do. But you were the only one who did, he said. Everyone else saw a wheelchair and looked away. You saw my father. He pressed something into her hand, a check that made her gasp. For your mother's medical bills. And for yourself. Consider it a small payment for the most valuable lesson anyone's ever taught me. But more valuable than the check was the envelope that came 3 days later. Inside was a photo. Richard Thornwood Sr. sitting at a dinner table with his son, both of them laughing, truly seeing each other again. On the back, in shaky handwriting, thank you for reminding us both what really matters. You didn't just help me stand, Maya. You helped us both remember how to be human. Maya put the photo on her fridge where she saw it every morning. Some people change the world with grand gestures and millions of dollars. But sometimes, the most profound change comes from simply seeing someone who's been invisible, from offering a hand to someone who's struggling to stand, from having the courage to say, "You matter. You're still here. I see you." In a world that moves too fast, that builds too high, that chases success while forgetting substance, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is slow down long enough to notice who's being left behind. And sometimes, one moment of genuine kindness can crack open hearts that seemed sealed shut forever, letting the light back in.